Beanie Sigel was the
Yeah, he was fine.
and they would only let Beanie Sigel only sell so many records. This came from an executive. But Benny, they would you couldn't be bigger than Jay-Z on Jay-Z's label.
What's that? That's Mob King?
Niggas feeling marvelous, yeah.
You gotta get the shoes though. Y'all know what it is.
Yeah, you hear about them parties? Nah, that wasn't for me. No, sir.
It's not just rumors anymore. The whispers around Diddy have grown into something louder, something dangerous. Word on the street is Diddy's not just fighting to stay out of prison, he's fighting to take others down with him. And at the top of that alleged hit list, none other than Jay-Z. Behind the velvet ropes, luxury suits, and billion-dollar grins, there's a war quietly brewing. One that could shake the very foundation of hip-hop as we know it. And if what insiders are saying is true, Diddy's not planning to crash alone. He might just be pulling Jay-Z down with him. And Beanie Sigel says it's already too late. Before we proceed, smash that like button and hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Did you just subscribe? Awesome. Diddy, once seen as the ultimate mogul of music, parties, and power, now finds himself staring into a future that looks less like red carpets and more like prison bars. The rumor mill isn't just spinning, it's on fire. Multiple insider reports claim that Diddy is in serious legal trouble, the kind that doesn't just go away with money or connections. We're talking about charges that could carry a life sentence if things go south. And if you've been paying attention, it's clear that something is shifting in the air. That bravado, that signature Diddy confidence, it's starting to crack. Whispers from behind closed doors suggest that Diddy is no longer playing hardball. He's allegedly playing ball with the feds. Not in public, not in court, but quietly, strategically, and with one goal in mind: saving himself. This isn't just about avoiding a long stretch in prison. It's about legacy preservation, brand protection, and damage control on an unimaginable scale. And what's even more explosive is who Diddy might be putting on the table in exchange for his own freedom. This isn't the kind of plea deal you hear about in tabloids. This isn't petty theft or celebrity drama. These are deeply rooted federal investigations that could unravel decades of industry dealings. Sources claim that Diddy is preparing to name names, major ones, and not just industry middlemen or behind-the-scenes handlers. We're talking about the faces of hip-hop royalty. Allegedly, one of the first people he's ready to throw under the bus is Jay-Z. Yeah, that Jay-Z, billionaire, mogul, icon, blueprint architect.
The accuser, identified only as Jane Doe, alleges that rapper Jay-Z, along with Diddy, indecently assaulted her at a New York house party in the year 2000 following the MTV Video Music Awards.
Holmes attended the award show with his then-girlfriend, Jennifer Lopez.
I mean, Mr. Carter has nothing to do with Mr. Combs' case or Mr. Combs. They knew each other professionally for a number of years, just like in all professions. People know each other. At the music awards, they support each other. You go to the NBA All-Star game, they support each other. That's just how professions work. There is no closer association between any of them. That's also a matter of fiction. That's all that there is. He doesn't know anything about the charges or allegations against him. He has nothing to do with that case. And there's nothing more to say.
To the world, Jay-Z and Diddy have shared red carpets, shared champagne, and shared success. But behind the scenes, their relationship might be darker and more fragile than anyone guessed. According to sources, Diddy feels betrayed. And now, with the heat on, he's ready to make sure everyone burns with him. This could explain the sudden shifts we've seen. Diddy withdrawing from the spotlight, rumors of panic behind the scenes, and insiders leaking carefully curated sound bites. If Diddy's legal walls are closing in, and the rumors are even half true, he may see this as his last chess move. Expose the people who let him take the fall. And Jay-Z? He might just be the first one on that list. A list that could explode through the music industry, shattering alliances, ending careers, and rewriting the narrative we've been sold for decades. The idea of Diddy flipping might have sounded laughable a year ago, but now, it's looking more and more likely with each passing headline. And if Diddy really does start talking, it won't just be a scandal, it'll be a cultural earthquake. Because when men with this much power, this much influence, and this much dirt start spilling secrets, there's no telling where the fallout will stop. And this is just the beginning. As if Diddy's looming legal collapse wasn't enough, another voice has risen from the shadows, one that carries weight, street credibility, and decades of unfinished business.
Weapons violations, attempted. You're trying to get a boy 20 to 40 years. They came to me with a deal. Their deal was 18, 36 years. Of course, I turned it down. Thought this was America, people. Guilty until proven innocent.
Beanie Sigel isn't just another rapper chiming in for attention. He's a veteran, a former general of the Rockefeller Army, and his warning isn't vague or cryptic. It's direct, loud, and chilling. Jay better run while he still can. But why is Beanie speaking out now? Why, after all these years, has he decided to throw gasoline on an already raging fire? It's because he knows what's buried beneath the surface. He's seen it, lived it, and he's calling out what others are too scared to say. Diddy allegedly has receipts. And those receipts might not just scorch Jay-Z's public image, they could obliterate it. Beanie has always been known as someone who tells it how it is. He's not one for subliminals or sneak disses. So when he says that Jay should disappear from the spotlight before the hammer drops, it sends a message, a very serious message. Because for Beanie to go public like this, it means he believes the dirt Diddy is sitting on isn't just tabloid fluff. It's real, raw, and career-ending.
So at that time, when, I'm going to court, and we about to be on tour. We on tour. So whole nother tour. Yeah, we on a whole nother tour. So, I'm going for my bail hearing in the feds. And the judge asked Jay, everybody's saying all these good things and all that. The character witnesses, Dame, and, everybody's saying, even Jay said a whole lot of good things about me, and the judge was going to let me go. Monitor. And she said, would you be willing, and that's the part that people don't have, would you be willing to be responsible for his whereabouts, not be responsible for my actions, just his whereabouts? Would you be willing to do that? Provide us with all the information, saying that he's going to be here, there. And after all that good, and he said no. But it was like the way he said it. And he put his head down. He was like, no, I've never been crushed like that ever in my life. Because I'm like, damn, this is my man. And I looked at it like, all right, no. What if I had to get the out of there? I'm in jail. I'm still tall. But what if I really needed to go? This was going through my mind. Get out of jail, you say? Bro, I had attempted in the state and the federal and all this shit. 40 years, it's over. This is what I'm facing, 40 years. What if in my mind, I'm thinking like, damn, what if I really need the road? Be on the run and go. I'm from this is my man and I love you. If he's kicked up, I'm getting my man, I'm getting him out by any means necessary. So for me to look him in his eyes and I'm sitting, I'm shackled. Around the wrist, ankles and everything, and the thing was like, oh. That was that. I don't know, that fucked me up. It took everything in me not to let one go. That took away a lot that I thought that we had. Right.
He points to the 90s, the era that defined a generation of hip-hop. Back then, the industry was a jungle. Labels were powerful, but so were the whispers behind studio doors. Diddy and Jay-Z were right there in the center of it all. Deals made over drinks, rivalries settled in private backrooms, favors exchanged that might not stand up in court today. Beanie's suggestion is simple. Diddy remembers everything. And worse, he allegedly documented more than people realize. See, when most people think of Diddy and Jay-Z, they think of the glitz. Award shows, yacht parties, champagne bottles with the labels facing the camera. But Beanie says that was only one side of the story. The other side? It's darker, grimmer. The kind of stuff that's never written about in press releases or detailed in Netflix documentaries. Beanie paints the picture of a carefully crafted empire, one built on silence, sacrifice, and strategic betrayals. And if the walls really are closing in on Diddy, if he's really ready to cooperate with federal agents, then Beanie's fears become not just valid, but urgent. He's suggesting Jay's not safe. Not legally, not publicly, and certainly not morally. What's even more gripping is the motive. Beanie hints that Diddy feels betrayed, cut off by the very people he helped elevate. People who are now publicly distancing themselves, pretending those tight-knit relationships never existed. Jay-Z included. Beanie sees this as the beginning of Diddy's revenge tour. And if that's true, then Jay's long-maintained mystique, his above-it-all persona, might be the next to crumble. Because let's be real, Diddy's not going to name small fish. If he's talking, it's because he wants to shake the tree until every major branch falls. And Beanie? He's just ringing the alarm bell before the industry wakes up to a completely different reality.
Yeah, 5 in the morning, caught a flat. We caught a flat in Famous Fan on the turnpike.
We gotta wait for the spare to come.
Young little lady. I gotta get suited up, booted up. And you know, he is our brother, so we will be there to support him. So that the rock we are.
Did Jay really call up them people? Just need to know to add them to the infested extermination list.
Listen, before I even got there to the building, you gotta understand this. It's all documented. This year's Powerhouse, Jay came last year. In the Philadelphia Daily News, the day after the Powerhouse, it had an article. And I didn't even go to the Powerhouse last year. It had an article in it. Inside sources say Jay-Z beefs up security and threat that a retaliation from Beanie Sigel for dropping him from the label.
This was in the newspaper.
It's in the paper. It's public record.
Mm-hmm.
It's $20. You can search it and find it.
Mm-hmm.
It's public record. That was last year. So when I'm reading this, like, damn, what the, you know what I mean? Inside sources say.
Right.
Where that come from? I ain't never see the Powerhouse where they got boot cops walking around with K9s and all that shit. Go on the internet, Google it. Bernard Hopkins was there. I didn't even know Bernard was there.
Right.
Go to allhiphop.com. He confirms it.
So there you are, just like the song says.
Yeah, because what happened was, I stood right in the, and because they made sweeps. When I came in the building and people was going in the back and all that where the dressing rooms was at, we was standing in the back, me and my peoples or whatever. Bleak come out with 5 bodyguards. What's up, C? No, what's going on? Damn, what's up? What you doing? Who back there, Jay? Come on, let's go back there. And you keep on moving the conversation. You don't want to go back there. Your bodyguard's there. And I don't got no, you know what I mean, to pass. He was like, man, you need to come holler at the big hump. Man, dude, don't with me. I ain't going back there. And that's what I told him. Big homie, don't
To understand the gravity of Beanie Sigel's warning today, you have to rewind to the early 2000s, the golden era of Rockefeller Records. Back then, Beanie wasn't just another rapper trying to catch a break. He was a pillar, a soldier, the street-certified enforcer who gave the rock its edge. He brought grit, authenticity, and respect to a label built on luxury, lyrics, and legacy. Beanie was the heartbeat of the streets, and for a time, Jay-Z was the brain. But then came the cracks. When Beanie caught serious charges, gun possession, potential federal time, he expected his loyalty to be repaid. He wasn't some flaky artist looking for handouts. He had gone to war for Jay-Z's brand, dropped hits, repped the rock through legal chaos and personal loss. And now, in his darkest hour, he thought Jay would step up. Not financially, not even emotionally, just publicly. Just enough to remind the courts that Beanie Sigel wasn't alone. That's when the betrayal hit like a freight train. In court, the judge turned to Jay-Z, who had spoken highly of Beanie's character just moments earlier. All the praise in the world was meaningless compared to what came next. The judge asked a simple question. Would Jay be willing to vouch for Beanie's whereabouts while out on bail? Not his behavior, not his legal outcome, just his location. Jay looked down, paused, and said, no. That moment crushed Beanie. Not just because he was facing decades behind bars, but because that no didn't come from a stranger. It came from someone he called his brother, someone he rode for, someone he would have risked it all for, without hesitation. It wasn't just disappointing. It was devastating. Imagine sitting there in a courtroom, shackled, fighting for your freedom, while the man you helped build an empire with, your mentor, your big homie, refuses to vouch for you. Not because he can't, but because he won't. Beanie described it as one of the most painful experiences of his life. Not just because he was denied, but because it exposed the truth. Jay-Z saw him as a liability, not a brother. And from that point forward, the mask was off. The betrayal wasn't about business. It was about trust, about a silent bond that was supposed to be unbreakable, especially in a culture where loyalty is everything. Beanie stood tall when things got rough. He never folded, never aired dirty laundry, even when he had every reason to. And what did he get in return? Silence, distance, disrespect. That moment, Jay lowering his head and quietly declining to help, became the foundation for years of resentment. It shifted Beanie's entire worldview. It made him question not just Jay-Z's loyalty, but the entire industry. The labels, the execs, the brothers who smile in public and disappear in private. Beanie's pain isn't performative. It's not a publicity stunt. It's the kind of wound that shapes a man's entire narrative. And in recent years, as the hip-hop world reflects more on mental health, trauma, and manipulation in the industry, Beanie's story has become a cautionary tale of what happens when you give everything to someone who sees you as disposable. So when Beanie warns that Jay should run now, before Diddy starts spilling everything, he's not just speaking from speculation. He's speaking from scars. Because betrayal this deep, it doesn't fade. It just waits.
Beanie Sigel is complaining a lot these days.
Well, he has a lot to complain about.
I know.
Not me.
Well, actually, this morning I just got a brand new interview. It's half an hour long, and he's talking basically about you, about the company, about basically how you didn't push him as much as, let's say, 50 Cent pushed some of his boys. How do you feel about that?
Well, Beanie Sigel at the time, and you can look it up if you like, but just to be honest, was driving 2 Bentleys. I don't know how. It's impossible to drive 2 cars at one time. With his mama in the sticks and selling 800,000 records, I don't know what more can you do for somebody, at that point. What people choose to do when they attain that type of success, at some point you have to look in the mirror and look at yourself. Beanie Sigel had a record deal, a record label, and a clothing line. I mean, it never went platinum, ever. I don't know, in the history of rap, has anyone done so much with so little? So I don't even know what more can you do for a person at that point. A record deal, that's normal. A record label and a clothing line. So if that's not pushing a person, I mean.
When Beanie Sigel first signed with Rockefeller, he wasn't just signing a contract. He was pledging loyalty to something bigger than music, to a movement, to a brotherhood. And for a while, it looked like that loyalty was mutual. Jay-Z brought Beanie into the fold not just as an artist, but as a symbol of the Rock's credibility. Beanie gave the label its street legitimacy, the kind you can't buy, fake, or manufacture. He wasn't the glossy, suit-wearing corporate mogul. He was the raw, uncut voice of the streets, standing on the front line for the brand. But over time, that loyalty started to cost him. At first, the signs were subtle. Beanie's projects weren't getting the same push as others. His videos weren't landing on prime spots. His name slowly started disappearing from the Rock's inner circle events. He chalked it up to business decisions. Maybe the label was shifting focus. Maybe there was a new strategy. But behind the scenes, a more brutal reality was unfolding. Beanie Sigel was becoming a liability. Why? Because he wasn't polished. He wasn't press-trained. He wasn't safe for corporate expansion. Jay-Z, on the other hand, was evolving into something bigger. From rapper to businessman. From hustler to icon. And icons don't carry baggage. Beanie's authenticity, the very thing that made the Rockefeller brand feel real, was now the thing that made Jay nervous. The pivot was slow, but deliberate. Beanie started noticing how deals that should have been his were mysteriously falling through. Endorsements that were in the works got ghosted. Meetings with outside partners never materialized. And then came the releases. Every time Beanie had a project, somehow Jay-Z's album dropped around the same time. Coincidence? Maybe once. Maybe twice. But every time, it felt calculated. Worse yet, Beanie started to hear whispers. Executives would tell him off the record that Jay was capping his potential, that he had quietly made it clear to the higher-ups. Push Beanie too hard, and there would be consequences. It was like he was being punished for not playing by rules he didn't even know existed. To the world, Jay and Beanie were still cool. They'd show up for the occasional photo op smile when cameras flashed. But behind the scenes, a silent war was raging. Jay wasn't just letting Beanie fade. He was allegedly orchestrating it. It became even more apparent when Beanie tried to branch out. When he attempted to land his own movie deals, launch side ventures, or secure independent collaborations, he was told no. Not because his work wasn't good, but because he was still under the Rockefeller umbrella. And Rockefeller, apparently, wasn't giving him room to grow. Beanie once described the feeling like this. It was like being in a mansion with all the doors locked. He could see success. He could taste it. But he couldn't access it. Not without permission. And permission never came. Instead of being treated as a cornerstone of the label, he was treated like a threat to the empire's evolving brand. Jay didn't want him shining too bright, because Beanie's light was unpredictable. He couldn't be controlled. He couldn't be polished. And in a world increasingly focused on brand partnerships and billion-dollar handshakes, unpredictability was a risk Jay couldn't afford. So Beanie was shelved. Still technically part of the label, but no longer part of the vision. The transformation was devastating. Beanie went from being Jay's right-hand man to a ghost in the machine. One day, he was standing shoulder to shoulder with giants. The next, he was on the outside looking in. It wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. This was a man who had stood trial, done time, taken the heat, and now, when he needed backing, he got silence. When he needed a lifeline, he got locked doors. And the industry took notice. People started whispering, if Jay could do this to Beanie, who else would he sacrifice for elevation? Because once loyalty becomes liability, the rules change. And Jay-Z? He's always played to win.
Beans was getting ready. We thought he was going to go to jail for a couple of years. He was on trial. So I was trying to make 4 albums for him, or 5. I was more bothered when Beans chose to go with Jay. That one hurt. Because I'd done a lot and prepared. I chose State Property over Rockware. And I wanted to just roll out with State Property. But it almost like he tricked Beans to shelf him, and his life up to me doing that. But I had him. You know what I mean? Like, that was my new Jay.
If there's one moment that defines Beanie Sigel's heartbreak, one event that turned brotherhood into bitterness, it was what happened in that cold courtroom. Picture it. Beanie, shackled at the ankles, surrounded by guards, facing federal charges that could steal decades of his life. The courtroom was tense. His future hung in the balance. The judge sat above him, deciding whether he'd walk out that day or rot in a cell until trial. His only hope? A character witness. Not just any witness, Jay-Z, the man Beanie had protected, defended, and stood beside through everything. Jay wasn't just a celebrity endorsement. He was a friend, a mentor, a brother. His words carried weight, not just to fans, but to the legal system. When Jay praised you, it mattered. And in that moment, his presence could have tipped the scale toward freedom, or at the very least, hope. And at first, it looked like things were going in Beanie's favor. Jay had said good things, spoke about Beanie's loyalty, his potential, his contribution to Rockefeller. Everyone in the room could feel it. The judge was listening. Then came the question. The judge asked Jay-Z a direct, straightforward question. Would you be willing to take responsibility for Mr. Sigel's whereabouts while on bail? Not his actions, not his behavior. Just confirm he'd be where he was supposed to be. Just vouch that Beanie wouldn't vanish. Jay-Z looked down. He didn't argue. He didn't explain. He didn't offer compromise. All he did was shake his head and say no. In that single second, Beanie's world cracked. Not because of what the judge decided next. Not because of the consequences. But because of who said it and how. Beanie later said, I've never been crushed like that in my life. And it wasn't dramatics. It was pain. Real pain. the kind that sticks to your ribs years later. Because that wasn't a stranger denying him, it was Jay, a man who, up until that very moment, Beanie believed had his back. What made it worse was how Jay said it. No fight, no defense, no eye contact, just lowered his head and let the words fall out like they meant nothing. As if Beanie was a stranger to him. As if the years of loyalty, sacrifice, and shared history didn't exist. And Beanie wasn't asking for a miracle. He wasn't asking Jay to risk his fortune or his career. He was asking for belief, for solidarity, for a show of faith. Jay couldn't even give him that. It was then that Beanie realized he was on his own, that the bond he thought was unbreakable had been severed long before that courtroom session began. But the mental fallout didn't stop there. Later, Beanie would sit in his cell, replaying that moment in his head, trying to rationalize it, trying to convince himself there was a reason, that maybe Jay was advised not to do it, that maybe there were legal reasons. But every version of that story brought him back to the same brutal truth. Jay just didn't want to stick his neck out for him. And that hurt deeper than anything the court could have sentenced him to. This was the man who helped build Jay's empire from the ground up. Beanie had sacrificed opportunities, ignored outside offers, even stood silent when others turned on Jay. He took bullets, metaphorically and literally, for the rock brand. And when the spotlight turned cold, when the press moved on, he expected his brother to be there, just to stand up and say, "I'll make sure he's where he needs to be." But Jay didn't. In hip-hop culture, loyalty is everything. It's the currency of survival, of brotherhood, of realness. And Beanie learned the hard way that sometimes the image of unity is stronger than the actual bond behind it. That courtroom betrayal wasn't just a legal moment. It was a personal earthquake that split Beanie's identity as an artist, as a man, and as a friend. Because after that day, he didn't just question Jay-Z. He questioned everything.
He actually came and got me when I got out of prison. And we was on a tour bus and they was interviewing me. And they asked me then and there on a bus. Now I'm just getting out of prison. Like he at the jail picked me up. And they posed that question that I was, or made the statement that I was going to be with Dame Dash Music Group. And I said then that I didn't want to make that choice between Jay or them. I just wanted to stay neutral. I believe if we had those conversations, I believe I would have wrote.
There was a time when Rockefeller Records wasn't just a label, it was a movement, a kingdom. It was the gold standard for what hip-hop could be when street credibility met business brilliance. But beneath the surface of luxury cars, music videos, and diamond-encrusted logos, cracks were forming. And by 2004, Those cracks turned into a collapse. On the outside, fans saw The Rock as untouchable. Jay-Z, Dame Dash, Kareem, Biggs, Burke, they were the Triforce. Artists like Beanie Sigel, Freeway, Memphis Bleak, and Cameron made up a roster that could have lasted generations. They had the streets, the sales, the swag. But inside the boardroom, a different game was being played. Dame Dash and Jay-Z were engaged in a quiet war. A cold, calculated power struggle that would eventually rip the company apart. While the public saw Big Brother unity, what was happening behind closed doors was far from harmonious. Dame was the rebel, unapologetic, passionate, street-connected. Jay was the tactician, silent, strategic, always planning 2 moves ahead. And stuck in the middle of this fallout was Beanie Sigel, loyal to both, but ultimately betrayed by them in different ways. Beanie wasn't just collateral damage. He was the litmus test of what mattered more, friendship or finesse. At the time, Beanie was one of the most respected voices in the game. His lyrics were raw, his street stories real. His brand State Property wasn't just a clothing line. It was a lifestyle, a symbol of Philly's firepower embedded into The Rock's DNA. He starred in films, sold records, and moved culture. He was as essential to The Rock's grittiness as Jay-Z was to its polish. But when Jay made the decision to go solo, to align himself with Def Jam and take on the presidency, Beanie was one of the first to feel the chill. That's when things got strategic. First, the support dried up. Beanie's third album, The Be Coming, was filled with pain, introspection, and lyrical excellence. But it was recorded under immense pressure. Beanie was dealing with court dates, incarceration, and emotional burnout. It should have been a defining album. But without proper backing, marketing, or attention from the label, it fell into commercial limbo. Then came the erasure. Jay-Z, now a corporate king, was moving away from street ties. The gritty narratives didn't fit the new image. Boardroom Jay couldn't afford Beanie Sigel the way Street Jay could. And so Beanie, once a prized asset, became a quiet problem. Executives stopped returning calls. Collaborations fell through. Invitations dried up. Jay dropped albums around the same time as Beanie, not once, not twice, but repeatedly. It was enough to strangle momentum, to ensure Beanie never had the breathing room to climb out on his own. Some called it coincidence. But Beanie, looking back, called it something else, intent. Jay was reshaping his empire, and in that reshaping, there was no room for unpredictability. No room for a man who didn't play politics. Beanie was from the block, not the boardroom. And Jay's empire was no longer a neighborhood. It was a Fortune 500 machine. When Beanie tried to make moves on his own, the pushback was silent but strong. He wanted partnerships, touring deals, solo opportunities, but they'd vanish. Somehow, doors closed before he even knocked. Word behind the scenes was that Jay wasn't just uninvolved. He was the one pulling strings to keep Beanie on the shelf. Even Dame Dash, during interviews years later, confirmed this. He said it plainly. Jay allegedly manipulated Beanie into aligning with him, only to ghost him. Not out of malice, necessarily, but out of calculated necessity. Jay wanted to protect his image. Beanie, with legal troubles and a raw presence, became a threat to that image. So instead of elevating him, Jay sidelined him. It was a chess move, and Beanie was the piece sacrificed. By 2005, Rockefeller was split. Jay had taken control of the catalog, the crown, and the corporate access. Dame was pushed out. Biggs faded into the background. And Beanie? He was left in the wreckage. The worst part? He didn't even get a call. No explanation. No transition. Just silence. A man who had gone to war for the brand now found himself outside its gates, watching his contributions get erased in real time. And still, Beanie didn't immediately speak up. He waited. He gave Jay the benefit of the doubt. But as time passed and the patterns repeated, the truth became clearer. He wasn't part of the new rock vision. He was part of the cleanup. Strategic moves had been made. Quiet ones. Shady ones. And Beanie's legacy was left buried beneath the rubble. While Beanie Sigel was left to navigate legal battles, public silence, and the slow death of his music career, someone else was paying attention, watching everything unfold with both frustration and fury. Dame Dash. If there's anyone who truly understands how deep the betrayal ran at Rockefeller, it's Dame. He wasn't just a co-founder. He was the fire behind the movement. The man who believed in independence, in giving artists ownership, in building something outside the machine. And he was also the one who saw what really happened to Beanie, not through press releases or public statements, but from inside the room where decisions were made. In interviews over the years, Dame Dash has dropped bomb after bomb, and none louder than when he spoke about what Jay-Z did to Beanie Sigel. According to Dame, it wasn't just abandonment, it was strategy. Cold-blooded chess disguised as business. Dame paints the picture like this. He had plans for Beanie. Big ones. He believed Beanie was the future of the rock after Jay moved into executive territory. He even prepped multiple albums in advance for Beanie, anticipating a potential prison stint. Dame wanted to keep the brand alive, to make sure Beanie stayed relevant even if he had to sit down for a while. That's how much he believed in him. But while Dame was preparing for war, Jay was allegedly preparing a quiet execution. Behind the scenes, according to Dame, Jay convinced Beanie to roll with him instead, promising more visibility, more opportunity, more clout. And for a moment, Beanie took the bait. He aligned with Jay over Dame. That decision, Dame said, hurt. Because in his eyes, Beanie wasn't just a rapper on the label, he was the street general. The raw, unapologetic presence that gave Rockefeller its teeth. And in Dame's words, Jay tricked Beanie, got him to switch sides, only to shelf him. No albums, no promotion, no growth, just silence. Dame went even further, suggesting that Jay didn't just ignore Beanie's potential, but deliberately sabotaged it. He claims Jay moved quietly to block Beanie's deals, undermining efforts to revive his career, even years after the Rock split. To Dame, this wasn't business, it was betrayal. It's not hard to believe. Beanie himself eventually confirmed much of what Dame said. He admitted that in hindsight, choosing Jay over Dame was a mistake. That he had been blinded by the promise of what Jay represented: mainstream power, bigger access, higher platforms. But that promise came with a cost. Dame, on the other hand, was there, accessible, consistent. While Jay was off building his billionaire empire in private meetings and corporate towers, Dame was still in the trenches, still fighting for his artists, still showing up to court dates, still pulling up in South Philly to talk business face to face. It wasn't just about money. It was about principles, loyalty, presence. Beanie said it himself. Dame would come to the block, hang with the crew, check in with moms. He wasn't just a suit. He was family. But Jay became a phantom, hard to reach, harder to read, and eventually, impossible to trust. What makes this chapter of the story so powerful is how it reframes everything we thought we knew about Jay-Z. For years, he was seen as the calculated genius, the master of moves, the man who rose above drama by staying silent. But Dame's perspective flips the script. Maybe that silence wasn't maturity, it was strategy. Maybe what looked like distance was actually control. Control over who made it and who didn't. Who got shined and who got shelved. Who got elevated and who got erased. According to Dame, Jay didn't just forget Beanie. He made sure Beanie couldn't come back. And that's a level of betrayal that cuts deeper than most fans can even comprehend. It's not just about rap. It's about lives. About trust. About what happens when the very people who built you up turn around and shut the door behind them. So when Dame Dash speaks now, it's not from a place of bitterness. It's from a place of clarity. He's not exposing Jay for clout. He's exposing a pattern. One that's allegedly repeated itself not just with Beanie, but with others. And if Diddy's legal situation really does erupt into an industry-wide implosion, Dame Dash won't be surprised. Because in his eyes, that mask has been slipping for years. Now that the stage is set, the question becomes impossible to ignore. What happens if Diddy actually flips? Because if these insiders are right, if Diddy really is sitting down with the feds, naming names, and cracking the silence of the industry's most tightly sealed secrets, then we're not just talking about a few headlines. We're talking about an earthquake that could bring down the entire tower. And make no mistake, Jay-Z's name, whether whispered or shouted, is at the center of the conversation. See, Diddy isn't some rookie who got caught up in a one-time mistake. He's a veteran, a mogul, a man who's navigated power at the highest levels of music, fashion, and business. He's shared boardrooms with billionaires and backroom deals with legends. If he talks, he doesn't just have dirt, he has blueprints. Names, dates, deals, secrets buried so deep the industry would rather pretend they never existed. That's what makes Beanie Sigel's warning so heavy. He's not theorizing. He's speaking from experience. He's already watched how someone like Jay can cut ties, shift narratives, and leave allies behind to preserve his brand. And now, he sees that same pattern playing out again, but this time on a much bigger scale. To Beanie, this isn't just karma circling the block. This is the reaping, the consequences of decades of quiet betrayals. Because when you build an empire on silence, when you rise by distancing yourself from mess while still benefiting from it, eventually, someone's going to speak. And Diddy? He might be that someone. Not out of honor, not out of justice, but out of desperation. Legal insiders say that if Diddy faces serious time, he won't hesitate. He'll start talking, and he won't stop. He'll bring receipts. From wild 90s parties to questionable business deals, from protected friends to private settlements. And if Jay-Z's name appears in any of that, the impact will be seismic. This isn't a diss track. This isn't a rumor on Twitter. This is federal. This is courtroom-level exposure. The kind that forces apologies, resignations, and rewritten legacies. The kind that pulls the curtain back on the entire music machine. So when Beanie says Jay should run, it's not a metaphor. It's a recognition of how close the fire's getting. Fans are already piecing things together, asking the hard questions. Why has Jay stayed so quiet? Why does he seem to distance himself when pressure builds? Why do so many of his closest collaborators, from Dame to Beanie to others who haven't even spoken yet, all seem to share the same story: abandonment when things got real. And now, the industry is waiting. If Diddy speaks, Jay's carefully protected empire could finally face its reckoning. The image of the flawless mogul, the silent genius, the untouchable icon, that could all come crashing down with a few lines of testimony and a handful of confidential files. Because this time, it's not about lyrical beef. It's not about egos or hurt feelings. It's about evidence and history. And suddenly, all those old stories, the court betrayals, the blocked albums, the silent erasures, they don't sound like bitterness anymore. They sound like warnings we ignored. What's wild is that Beanie doesn't sound angry now. He sounds resolved, like a man who's already made peace with what happened. But that calmness, that clarity, that's what makes his message even more chilling. He's not asking for revenge. He's just saying, watch, it's coming. So now we've got to ask, is Jay-Z finally facing the consequences of how he climbed to the top? Is the image of the polished, calculated businessman about to be cracked wide open? We may be witnessing the beginning of a new era in hip-hop, not just musically, but culturally. One where old ghosts resurface, truth overrides myth, and the empire built on perfect branding finally meets its most dangerous threat: reality. And the one delivering it might be a man with nothing left to lose. So let's really talk about it. If Diddy drops names, and if Jay-Z is one of them, how will that change the legacy of the man we've come to see as untouchable? Do you think the industry is finally paying the price for how it's handled loyalty, betrayal, and silence? Or is this just another media storm that'll pass? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear what you think about Jay, about Diddy, about everything that's finally coming to the surface. Smash that like button and make sure you subscribe, because the next chapter, it might be the biggest one yet. And trust us, it's only just beginning.